In this video, we're going to look at measuring the resistance in a circuit. This is the Microtrainer. I built this board to help demonstrate some of these basic electrical principles. And over here I have a Fluke 15B plus multimeter. So the first thing that I need to do when measuring resistance is to change to the omega symbol. So this is omega. The omega symbol will allow us to measure the ohms, or the resistance in a circuit. When we're measuring resistance, we need to put our black lead in the common, and the red lead will go right here where the omega symbol is. This OL symbol is an indication of over limit or overload. It's referred to as a lot of different things. What it means is the resistance is so high that the meter cannot register that reading. When we measure resistance, we're going to measure across the device that we want to measure the resistance of. So when we're measuring resistance on our board right here, one of the key things is we want to have the battery disconnected. If I measure resistance with the battery connected, I'm not going to get a good reading. Alright, so the first thing we can do is we can measure the resistance across this switch. In the off position, we see that we get an OL, indicating this is very, very high resistance. It's so high that the multimeter can't read it. When I switch the switch to the on position, I would expect the resistance to go down significantly. So we get our resistance measurement there, and we're about 0.6, 0.5, depending on how I probe it. We're very little resistance across that switch. And that's good. We want to have very little resistance across the components that are not the load in the circuit. So a wire, a switch, those should all have very little resistance. I'm going to turn my switch back to the off position, and my master switch, remember, it's in the off position. I can measure the resistance value of a resistor right here. If I measure this position right here, I can see that this resistor is 0.993 K ohms. It's really important to look at this prefix, this K. K is for kilo or kilo, and it is 1,000. So 1,000 times this. So this is a 1 K ohm resistor. Resistors like this have a specific fixed value. This number is an indication that this is a 1 K ohm resistor. And then there's a certain level of accuracy that it'll be pretty close to 1 K, but it's not going to be exact. And that depends on the resistor. You could maybe measure the resistance of an LED. Our LED is OL. The resistance of the LED changes with voltage, so it's a really unique type of load. And I have a whole video that just talks about the forward voltage required to turn an LED on, so we won't measure that. But down here at the bottom, I have these individual rows of resistance. So this very first one, this is milliohm. When I measure this value, my multimeter probably won't, depending on the precision level of your multimeter. This specific meter doesn't have a very good milliohm measurement. I would need a more precise multimeter, but we can measure close to what this is. So this should be about 0.1 ohms of resistance. And then if I move to this 1 ohm resistor, we should see about 1 ohm. Now remember, the way that I'm putting my multimeter leads in here, as well as the rating of the resistor, I'm going to get a little bit different, but this is the important part about making these measurements, is to be very careful and understand the unit, that prefix that is placed before. So if I go to the 100, this should be close to 100. Okay, and then this is 1K, so this should be close to 1,000 ohms. So I've got pretty close to 1,000 ohms. Okay, here is 10K or 10,000 ohms. So we're looking for that K up there at the top, so that's about 10K. And then this one is 10M, 10 mega ohms. This should be close to 10 million ohms. So this is a lot of resistance compared to this 10K, or if I had a 10 ohm resistor. We can also measure the resistance of something in series like this. So in a series circuit, here I'm measuring, this is about 200 ohms. These resistances add up as I go across there. We'll have a separate video about a parallel circuit and its resistance, but it's kind of unique that here I have these 100 ohm resistors, and when I measure the resistance, it's actually 50 ohms of resistance. So I'll have a separate video that discusses this, but essentially the current now has two paths to be able to go through, and so my resistance has decreased. So two resistors in parallel are 50 ohms, two 100 ohm resistors in series is 200 ohms. On the back, we have information to remind you when you're measuring resistance. So the first key is make sure to power off before you're testing. A low number typically means I have a good path. Another way to say that is that I have continuity, a continuous path for the current to flow through. OL is an indication that I have so much resistance that the meter cannot register that resistance. And so that typically means that there is an open in the circuit, but OL means very high resistance. So hopefully this helps you to know how to measure resistance in a circuit. The big key is don't have power connected. You have to disconnect the battery if you want to measure resistance.